Hey everyone, this is Zoras, my casuals, and in today's video, I'm going to talk about epic commander pairings for free-to-play players, specifically for the open field, the Garrison, Ark, or Sunset Canyon, as well as some extra tips, so make sure to check it out. So I'm going to give you my top combinations of epic commanders to pair together for different situations. Make sure to look at the video or the description. I'm going to put annotation of the chapter so you can navigate the video and find exactly the information that you're looking for. Also, please make sure to subscribe and drop a like on this video. It greatly helps the channel grow and I can this way make more videos for you guys. As well as always feel free to leave me a comment in the video and let me know what kind of video guide you would like to see next. So before we get started with the actual pairings, I want to highlight the role of a free-to-play and epic commanders in Rise of Kingdom. Of course, you are not going to be able to compete with whales or pay-to-win players who have tons of legendary commanders and equipment and all that stuff and T5, and you know, it gets really hard to fight these kind of players. But as a free-to-play player, you can make a big difference when you bring buffs and debuffs to the enemy. So if you and a whale or a strong player are fighting another player, you basically will make it so that your whale and yourself get stronger and buffed so that you do more damage, and that way you're also saving hospital bills and making it so that your strong player is stronger against them. You can make a very big difference. Now this comes in the form of buffs like Joan of Arc, for example, especially when she expertise. Now this is an AoE buff that buffs all the infantry, cavs, and archers, as well as gives them rage per second. Now this is definitely the #1 biggest buff in the game by far right now, especially at this stage. You want to have a Joan of Arc somewhere, often as a secondary, and be buffing the marches of your friends. There's also plenty of other commanders, such as Oljimanduk, which reduces the defense of the target that he's attacking by 30% for 2 seconds, as well as many other commanders who do similar effects, which will just make it so that you and your marches and the marches of your whales and your friends will be more impactful, and you in that way are going to be bringing more to the table than what you realize. Most of the whales do not bring all of these commanders all the time because they just can't bring them all. They only have 5 marches, and there's a lot of legendary who also give great effects. So by you being the person who brings these commanders, you're giving it extra value and making it very, very valuable. I always say that the players like this have one of the biggest impacts in the fights. If played well, supporting big players will be amazing value, and it is necessary to win in this game. Now, first things first, I want to start with Sun Tzu as my #1 commander for epic. Obviously, he is the best epic commander in the game by far. He is great in Sunset, he's great in Expedition, he's great on open field, and he's also one of the best Garrison commander. So he does a arc damage in front of him, which is AoE. So that's amazing when you're going to be fighting more than one opponent. He also boosts infantry, which is great. And taking 10% less damage, this is actually very, very valuable stat. More than people realize. 10% damage is huge in this game. And of course, adding skill damage and a garrison skill. So all of this is very, very good. Now, when you're choosing a secondary for Sun Tzu, you want someone who also has skill damage to benefit from this. Obviously, it's not necessary, but it is better. Now, my choice obviously would be Oljimanduk in this choice. So Sun Tzu Olji is a pretty good march. They both have very good infantry boost. They also have damage factor abilities. So as I said, he also debuffs the enemy by 30%, so makes Sun Tzu's army make more damage and makes your ally do more damage. Now 750 is not the highest number, but it's still a number, so it's still getting benefit from the skill damage boost of Sun Tzu. As well as this is just a very nice, it doesn't happen that often, but when it does happen, it's just extra damage, which is, again, great. So this is a very strong infantry march. As a free-to-play, as an epic player, Sun Tzu Olji is my recommended #1 infantry march that you want to have in the field. Now, of course, as a secondary to Sun Tzu, there can be quite many other choices. One choice that's not terrible, actually, Boudica is really not bad at all. 1000 damage factor, and also reduces the rage and attack of the enemy. Again, this is a great debuffing for the enemy. You will be hindering the march that you're attacking a lot with this. As well as you also have this, that when you use a skill, you gain 50 rage and heal. Now, as we know, Sun Tzu is a skill casting person. Like, he does a lot of skills, also has its own rage generation. So the more rage you generate, the more skill you use, the more this happens, the more strong your March is. So I find Boudica a very, very good secondary for someone like Sun Tzu, especially in the early game, as well as this is just extra bonuses. So Boudica, very, very good secondary commander. I find that Boudica in general goes well with almost anyone as a secondary because of the fact that she's a rage generator and does a good amount of damage and debuffing. So I really, really like Boudica as well with Sun Tzu. Now, in terms of what else is available, of course, Joan can work, but I don't recommend Joan here because she doesn't do much of anything with the skill damage. While the buff is very good, I find that there's other commanders that lead better for Sun Tzu. So I would not recommend Joan. Another possibility is Osman. Osman has a huge amount of damage, so 1100 damage here, as well as this will do extra damage after using a skill, so it's like 1500 damage total. Now it all gets boosted by the 20% from Sun Tzu, as well as you have a troop capacity here, so you just bring more troops in general. Now this is very, very good, but this will make your march very squishy, so if you get targeted, you'll die very quickly. So this can work well in situations where Sun Tzu is not tanking all the damage. For example, in the Expedition, it kind of can work, as well as Sunset Canyon, and even sometimes in Ark, this can work. It's basically just a glass cannon nuking max damage build, so you wouldn't want your Sun Tzu to be in the front of the line, you would want it to be in the back line, as well as in this scenario, you would like to have the skill tree maxed out for maximum damage if your Sun Tzu is supposed to be a damage dealer. Otherwise, I recommend that you do this kind of tree, so full infantry, because you're going to be leading a full infantry march, and you get a lot of stats to your infantry, as well as a lot of defensive stuff. You also can slow out opponents in the open field, so this is very important for the open field, and you get a lot of health and a lot of movement speed. So if you're going to be using Sun Tzu in the open field, you're going to be using this tree fully, as well as you're going to get Rejuvenate as fast as possible. The priority is Rejuvenate before you get this, and then afterwards you get this, and then the rest can go in stuff like this here, which is just extra to get more skill damage and more tankiness out of Sun Tzu. For my second march of epic commander in the open field, I would recommend Pelagius. Pelagius is basically Minamoto's version of like a free-to-play version. He is a very, very strong epic commander. He is the best epic cavalry leading commander in the game. So if you do not have Minamoto at all, or if your Minamoto is like 5111 or 5511, you would be using Pelagius as a primary. Now, of course, you would be putting Minamoto in that instance as a secondary to do great work. Cao Cao also can work as a secondary to Pelagius, but if we're staying fully in the epic, the best two secondary commanders for Pelagius would be either Belisarius or Baybars. Now, it depends on the situation. Now, Pelagius is always going to be your best primary. He has a great ability for damage. He boosts a lot of the cavalry stats, as well as he has a heal. He also has the talents for cavalry and skill, so you can build him similar as Sun Tzu. You can build him full cav to boost the cavalry army and be tankier and all that, or you can build him full skill, and then he will be, in that way, a very high damage dealer, but very squishy, very weak. He will die very quickly. So as a free-to-play player, it's very rare that you're going to build full glass cannon and full skill, because you will get killed very, very fast if you are tanking damage from T5 players or big T4 players. Now, as again, you would get this kill quite quickly, and then you would max out this tree. That would be my recommendation for most content in this game, especially for the open field. And as I said, as a secondary commander, I personally say that Belisarius is probably the best that I would offer in here. Of course, Belisarius is more of a barb killer and movement speed guy, but this is, again, another one of these damage dealing, as well as reducing the attack and defense. So it's a very, very good ability. You're going to be making the marches that you're attacking weaker, so if your friends are attacking, this is going to be a very big bonus. Now, this is all barb, so obviously that doesn't matter. Now, this is very good. 30% defense, 30% of one stat in general is insane. It's obviously the expertise, but 30% is very, very, very high. So in itself, even if you ignore the march speed, this is great. It's a very, very good skill. Now, again, if you're leaving a fight, 50% march speed, this means that as a free-to-play player, you're going to be doing a lot of hit and run. If you get targeted, you want to run away. This will make it so that you already do that. You never get squeezed and killed. You can always run away and not lose your army, which is very valuable in this game. So again, Belisarius is just great because of that. And when you're attacking troops that have less than half HP, you're going to do 25% damage. Now, this happens often Nobody stays full HP for a long time in the open field, so this is very, very good. You're going to be catching up to people running away because of your ability of movement speed, and you're going to be doing more damage to them. So boosted with the fact that Pelagius is a very strong commander with a very high damage and abilities, this is going to be a very, very strong March for an epic player, both in open field and war, as well as anywhere else, such as expedition and stuff like that, as well as when you're killing barbarians. You can just switch it around and make Belisarius the first commander with peacekeeping and Pelagius as a secondary, and you will be getting very good value from killing barbarians that way, as well as killing farmers using Belisarius as a primary and Pelagius as a secondary. You can do very good damage that way, or you can obviously have your Belisarius as a mobility in that case to do that role, or just use Pelagius as a primary again. Now, the exception being that when you are in a potential fight where you're going to be killing more than one enemy, where AoE damage will benefit you, Baibars would do a very good job as a secondary, as well as he would do a pretty decent job as a primary, which also could be that Baibars has Belisarius as a secondary in that case, and then you can be using a Pelagius March with someone else. But I would say that I would recommend Pelagius primary with either Baibars or Belisarius as secondary. Now, you would be using Baibars in places such as Ark and Sunset Canyon specifically, or in the open field if there's tons of army fighting, because this is a big AoE damage as well as decreasing march speed, so it makes it so that they can't run away and you can do a lot of damage. Now, he also gives 20% attack increase, as well as this ability, which makes it that when you leave a battle, you heal and gain march speed. So again, chasing people running away. He is very, very good for open field, but that makes you very squishy. There's no type of defensive or healing statistics in here at all. So what will happen is that if you get targeted, you'll die very quickly. So this is going to be good when you're attacking AoE, a lot of marches, but not to get attacked. So if you're going to be in a position where there's only a few armies fighting, don't use Baibars. But if you're going to be in a position where there's a lot of enemy, especially like in Ark and Sunset and Expedition and all that stuff, Baibars is going to be a great secondary because you're going to make full use of this AoE damage, which gets boosted further with the expertise. Now, the third March I would recommend for open field epic commanders would obviously include Joan of Arc. Now, there's a few ways of doing this because Joan of Arc is, as I said, the best buffer in the game. Her buffs here, 30%, 3 times, it's like 90% stats for troops in general. It's absolutely incredible, and the 50 rage per second basically is giving 200 rage to anybody who's in that AoE. It's crazy good value. It's very, very, very good. As well as there's a slight heal here, which happens often enough, as well as just increased normal troop damage, so you're just doing more damage in general. There is really nothing bad about Joan of Arc, but you can use her as a primary, but she is very squishy. You'll get targeted and die very quickly, and if you're not using Cavs, you will be slow and you will die even quicker. So I would not recommend making Joan your primary in this case. I would recommend her making a secondary. Now, if you're a free-to-play player, but you still unlock heroes like Richard, for example, she will be absolutely amazing as a secondary to Richard. Even if Richard is 5-1-1-1, she will still do very great there. So many free-to-play players often tend to do that. You bring a Richard, he just heals, has infantry, is slow, but has a Joan secondary, so everyone around you is always being buffed. All the marches are being helped, and nobody's going to attack your Richard. I mean, they might, but it will take a long time to kill it. It's not very efficient. You're healing, you're tanky. So the longer they attack you, the more your allies, and you can keep killing their marches while everybody's buffed all the time. But that's a very, very strong possibility. Now, if you want to stay in full epic, there's a few options. So one of the really good combination that works well is Scipio. If you bring your Scipio high level, he is a very, very tanky commander. Obviously, you would probably focus on the leadership tree as well with a little bit of attack, because the leadership tree basically boosts different troop types. There's really some good stuff in here that makes you kind of tanky. Stuff like this increases your attack when you're weaker, as well as increases your defense here. Now here, if you're bringing a mixed army, you can have a percentage damage reduced taken, as well as here you can bring more troops in general. There's also stuff like this that gets extra rage, which means that you cast your abilities and you buff faster, and just extra little damage here and there. And this ability is kind of completely useless, so you would not get it for the open field fighting. So you just get like maybe this, and then you get the rest in here. Obviously you want something like the rage like this, and there's a few of these like this is very, very valuable because it's just reducing damage taken. You just want to be tanky, and that's where you would be getting your talents for this March. Now, the reason that it goes well with Scipio primary and Joan secondary is because of abilities like this. So in general, when you cast this, 25% reduced damage, 4-5 seconds. That is huge, makes you very tanky. Now we saw that Joan has a rage generation in her buff, as well as the buff itself just boosting every troop type. So Scipio can bring a mixed army, which can be mostly infantry to be tanky, as well as having all the buffs from the leadership talent. You're getting all the buffs from Joan, and you're getting this 25% damage reduce, which will be up almost all the time because of the way Joan works and he works with rage. Now this ability also is pretty good in general. Just make it so that you will be having a chance to heal when you get a bit weaker in HP, as well as just triggering extra damage, making your marches generally better, as well as having 10% increased troops. So you're going to bring more troops, so you're even more tanky and even stronger and harder to kill. So Scipio Joan is a very, very strong free-to-play epic open field march. You will be buffing and you will be very tanky. It is very good, and I think that if you're going to be bringing Joan, you should bring her with Scipio as a secondary, because it is the safest way to do so. Otherwise, like I said, you can bring her with Richard as a primary if you are a player that has unlocked Richard, which can be done even as a free-to-play. Otherwise, one exception in this case would be having Aethelflaed as a primary and Joan as a secondary. Now, Aethelflaed is a free-to-play commander. Of course, it takes longer to expertise as a free-to-play, but it is definitely still a very strong free-to-play commander. She is absolutely great at everything, as well as does AoE damage, debuffs everybody. So the thing with the Aethelflaed Joan March, she's a bit tankier than a Joan would be. Now, the talent is very important that you get this Cage of Thorn, because you will be basically slowing enemies. And as you see in the expertise here, you do more damage to slow the enemy. So it is very good. As well as, again, the leadership tree, we just kind of went over it. You want this kind of stuff and you want this kind of stuff. And as well as, like, I got a bit of this and a bit of this just to get more rage. You're basically a rage machine. You're always doing AoE damage and always buffing. Now, of course, you're a little bit squishy, so you have to be careful with that. But her abilities in general make her a little bit stronger at surviving and at doing a good amount of damage. So this is one of the exceptions. Aethelflaed Joan is a very popular march, and I would recommend it if you have Aethelflaed to a point where you can bring her. But obviously, if not, stick with someone like Scipio. Now, one last march I want to talk about for the open field. Again, this would be mostly focused as a debuffing march. I would suggest you maybe try and bring a Boudica as a primary, because you will be leveling your Boudica by doing peacekeeping, and she will eventually get to a very high level and be very strong for you. As well as she does have some pretty good talent trees, especially the skill one. Of course, if you want to be a very high damage dealer, she would do well, but just the fact that you can get Rejuvenate really helps her. And again, in this area, you basically can have a pretty okay integration tree. It basically means that you can bring more troops, and you can choose some of these that will buff a certain type of unit. If you lead a mixed army with her, she'll take less damage, and this ability itself is not completely terrible for a free-to-play player. It can be useful here and there, so it's not the best, but it is a very good march at doing one thing, and it is debuffing the enemy. Reducing rage of your enemy and their attack for 2 seconds is very good. Now, she also has some rage generation in her kit, so that makes it so that she will be casting this a lot. Now, as a secondary to her, you can bring quite a few options. Now, if you are bringing Boudica as a primary and your goal is really to debuff the enemy and make it so that your other marchers and your allies hit stronger, someone that goes well with Boudica in that case could be someone like Olgi to get even less defense and like more of a debuff on them. You could bring someone like Belisarius, who also does the same thing. There's a few commanders around like this that you could choose that would do an okay job, as well as if you have some of these legendary commanders who are like 5-1-1-1, such as any like Mina or Charles, whatever, and you don't want to level them up because they're not used as your primary, they would do well as a secondary here. Now, this is obviously not your priority. Your priority is really having, I would say, 2 or 3 very strong marches. So you'd like a level 60 Sun Tzu, a level 60 Pelagius, and expertise all of them, and have 2 or 3 very strong marches. Obviously, you also want a Joan of Arc, which is bringing a big buff. It is definitely your biggest role as a free-to-play player. So this is what I would focus on. Now, as an illustration of this, I have brought here what I consider to be the 3 top free-to-play marches for open field. So you can see here that I have a Scipio with Joan of Arc. Now, obviously, they're low level because I have the legendary commanders. I'm not a free-to-play players. But in this case, you would like to have the 3 primaries at level 60 or highest possible as soon as you can, and the primaries are always the ones we will take the talents from. So those are the 3 most important ones. As well with Joan, you want to expertise her as fast as possible because of her buff. And here Olgi does a very good secondary, and here Belisarius does a very good secondary. So with these 3 marches, you will do very, very well. You're bringing a good amount of tankiness, a good amount of damage, a lot of debuffs, and a lot of buffs. So these are very, very strong march. This is what I would focus on as a free-to-play player. Now, as I said, you can swap in and out some of these commanders. So Belisarius could be swapped for Baybars in this example because you want to do AoE damage, or for Ark or something like that. And you could remove Olgi and put someone like Osman or a damage dealer such as YSG if you have him like 5111 or something like that, and do very good damage here as well if you want to focus this as a damage dealing march. Again, be careful, you'll be squishy. So this is what I would suggest as my 3 priorities. Once you have all this level 60, everything expertise, then you can look at working on other marches. And as a free-to-play player, you'll still be able to unlock some good legendary commanders from your keys and stuff. So 5111 or 5511 legendary commanders are still very usable, some of them better than others. And there's a lot of resources on that, so I'm going to try and make a video about that as well in the future. But feel free to ask me some questions in the comments here, and I'm happy to answer them. Or join our Discord to come ask us directly, and I can help you with your marches there as well. So my last recommendation for a march of epic commanders will be for the wall. Of course, the wall is very important, and if you don't have level 60 Charles Martel or Richard and YSG and all that stuff, of course, this cannot be achieved. But the best commander in the epic tier for your wall is obviously Sun Tzu. He is unbeatable. There's no epic commander that will do a better job on the wall than him. So he is, again, one of the reasons why you should bring him to level 60 and max him out as fast as possible. Now, he's a great infantry leader, he's a great damage dealer, he's a great open field commander, but he's also a great garrison commander. Sun Tzu is obviously great also because he has this ability. Now, as a secondary to Sun Tzu, it will depend. There is a lot of good option. Actually, Pelagius is a very strong wall person as well because he has such great abilities. He does work very well with Sun Tzu. And this kind of stuff is really, it's 7% garrison and watchtower attack. So garrison means all your troops gain 7% attack, and then the watchtower does more damage. As well as having this kind of rage restoration stuff and a heal will make your garrison very strong. Now, again, as a secondary, you could be using someone like Richard, for example, especially if he's like at least 5111 or 5511, which is achievable as a free-to-play, as I said. So this would be a very good secondary to Sun Tzu. As well as someone like Olgi can be also pretty good, especially if you have a lot of infantry. He also has some pretty good garrison skills, of course. Now, I would not recommend putting someone like Joan. As much as she is very strong, she is not the greatest on the wall herself. Someone like Scipio could do a pretty good job because, of course, he reduces the damage taken. And, of course, Charles, if your Charles is 5511, you could be using him as a secondary on your wall, which would do very, very good. Or as a primary if you're advanced enough to have him at high levels. Now, with all that said, of course, your wall is important, but if you're a free-to-play and an epic player, you do not want to be using your wall. You do not want to be attacked. There is never going to be a situation where you're going to come out of that happy or alive. So I would recommend not focusing too much on the wall and instead making sure that you watch the guides about not getting zeroed and how to avoid this, especially in KVK. You want to make sure that you don't get zeroed. But as a last case scenario, of course, you will want to set up your wall in a way that has a Sun Tzu Richard kind of thing so that you survive as long as possible. But be careful. It's better not to be zeroed than to be prepared in case you are. So that's about it for my guide, guys. Of course, a lot of these things are subject to the situation going on when there's AoE, when there's not AoE, depending on the T5 you're playing. You should never go head on into a T5 players. But if you have one of your well attacking another T5 player well, bring these marches to buff your T5 player and debuff the enemy T5 player, which will make it so that your T5 player wins. Remember, you're a support player, you're helping your stronger players win the fight with you, and your help will make a big difference, and never forget that. As well as, of course, you can go around and fight other free-to-play players and have an edge if you have the correct marches and the correct setup. As always, make sure to join our Discord or leave your questions in the comments here if you have any, or any suggestions for future videos. And as well, make sure to please subscribe to the channel and like the video. It really helps us grow and it will help us make more of these videos for you. Thank you guys for watching, and we'll see you next time.